He didn't wait for your yes, he waited for your silence. And when you gave it, not out of love, but out of fear, exhaustion, or confusion, he smiled, called it affection, wore it like a badge, and named it love. He didn't wait for your yes. He waited for your silence, and that silence, born not from agreement, but from exhaustion, fear, or confusion, became the green light he ran with. The problem is, silence has always been misunderstood by people who are too impatient, too selfish, or too manipulative to wait for truth. They see a pause and call it permission. They hear no resistance and assume welcome. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's paralysis. You weren't saying yes, you just weren't ready to say no. And there's a difference, a powerful one. But someone who's more interested in control than connection doesn't care to look for that difference. They don't ask, "Are you okay?" or "Do you really want this?" They ask nothing. They take silence and dress it up as consent. They decorate it with smiles and late night texts and claims of love. And the worst part is, they believe it. Or pretend to. It's hard to notice it while you're inside it. Because when someone says all the right things, when they flood you with attention and affection, when they make you feel needed, it becomes easy to doubt your own discomfort. You tell yourself maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe love is supposed to feel confusing sometimes. Maybe staying quiet is part of keeping the peace. So you hold your breath. You bury your voice. You dim your light just to keep things stable. And he calls that love. But it wasn't love. It was convenience. For him. Because silence made everything easy. He didn't have to face your standards. He didn't have to ask hard questions. He didn't have to grow. He just had to be louder than your hesitation. And when someone benefits from your silence, they will always find ways to keep you quiet. Love doesn't just tolerate your voice. It wants it. It doesn't run from your no. It leans into it with respect. Real love says, take your time. Say what you feel. I'm not going anywhere. But when someone is rushing you, pressuring you, or twisting your uncertainty into consent, that's not love. That's manipulation wearing a smile. That's emotional pressure in disguise. That's someone too afraid of rejection to give you space. It's wild how silence can scream, how much it can carry. Behind that silence were nights you questioned yourself, days you avoided eye contact, moments where your chest tightened, but your lips stayed closed. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't have the words. Or maybe you had the words, but not the strength. Or maybe you had the strength, but not the safety. That's what real love creates, safety, not pressure. And when you finally found your voice, when you finally gathered the courage to speak, to ask for more, to set boundaries, he looked at you like you changed. Like you were suddenly difficult. Like the silence he once praised had betrayed him. But the truth is, you didn't change. You just stopped agreeing to things you never agreed to in the first place. You stopped confusing being quiet with being loved. Because love doesn't ask you to be silent. It doesn't feel like walking on eggshells. It doesn't make you small so someone else can feel big. Love makes room. Love listens. Love gives. If you ever had to shrink yourself just to keep someone around, that wasn't love. That was fear wearing your favorite memories. That was control, cloaked in comfort. That was someone who saw your silence as weakness instead of a wound. You deserve a love that doesn't need your silence to feel strong. You deserve someone who asks, waits, listens, and responds. Someone who understands that consent is not just about words. It's about energy, comfort, clarity. And if it's not enthusiastic, it's not love. If it's not safe, it's not love. If it costs your voice, your peace, your truth, it's not love. It's time you stop calling it that and start healing from it. Emotional manipulation is one of the most dangerous forms of control because it doesn't always come with bruises, yelling, or broken furniture. It comes with sweet words wrapped in invisible strings. It comes with someone making you feel like your emotions are too much, your boundaries are inconvenient, and your needs are a burden. It comes in soft tones and romantic gestures that cover hard truths. And the scariest part is, it often wears the mask of love. He didn't show up screaming. He showed up smiling. He told you what you wanted to hear, especially when you were hurting. He studied your silence, your insecurities, your patterns. And then he used them. Not always cruelly, not always obviously, but consistently. He learned what made you pause, what made you doubt yourself. And he quietly built his power in those cracks. That's how emotional manipulation works, not through violence, but through erosion. Not all at once, but piece by piece. He made you question your reality little by little. He told you that you were too sensitive when you reacted, that you misunderstood when you confronted him, that you were imagining things when your gut screamed something wasn't right. And after a while, you believed him. You stopped trusting your own feelings. You started apologizing for things that weren't your fault. You shrank to fit the version of yourself that wouldn't upset him. You adjusted your tone, your timing, your truth, just to keep the peace. But love isn't about peace at the cost of your self-respect. It isn't about silence in place of safety. Real love doesn't need to manipulate you into staying. It doesn't rely on guilt, shame, or obligation to keep you close. It doesn't confuse possession with protection or control with care. But emotional manipulation does. It twists everything. It leaves you dizzy, doubting, drained, and still somehow wanting more from the same person who keeps giving you less. He said he loved you. But love doesn't make you walk on eggshells. Love doesn't make you afraid to speak. Love doesn't make you feel like you're constantly messing up. But when you're emotionally manipulated, you don't notice the manipulation until it's deep. You just feel tired. You just feel heavy. You start to think maybe you're the problem. That's the trick. He never had to control you with force. He got you to control yourself. You stopped expressing what you needed. You stopped setting boundaries. You stopped dreaming outside of what he allowed, all because he framed your independence as selfishness, your voice as aggression, and your needs as drama. And every time you pushed back, he gave you just enough affection, just enough validation to pull you back in. That cycle of confusion and reward, that's not love, that's conditioning. He made you think his approval was the prize. But real love doesn't have winners and losers. It's not a game of who gives less to get more. It's not a test of how much pain you can swallow in the name of loyalty. Real love adds to you. It doesn't subtract your joy, your clarity, your self-worth. If someone's version of love makes you lose yourself, it's not love, it's manipulation wearing perfume. What makes emotional manipulation so powerful is that it plays with your desire to be good, to be loved, to be chosen. And when you're a kind-hearted person, that makes you vulnerable. He didn't choose you for your strength. He chose you for your softness, and then used that softness to his advantage. He built a version of love where your silence, your sacrifice, and your forgiveness were expected, not appreciated. And when you started to question it, he made you feel guilty for having needs at all. But there's nothing selfish about protecting your peace. There's nothing wrong with saying no to someone who only loves the version of you that doesn't challenge them. If someone needs you to be silent to feel powerful, that's not partnership, that's control. You don't need to be someone's emotional caretaker just to be loved. You don't need to explain your pain in 1,000 ways before it's heard. And you never need to stay in a place where your voice is too loud, your truth is too real, or your heart is too much. Manipulation wants you small. Love wants you whole. So if he turned your silence into a yes, if he called your hesitation love, if he ever made you feel like expressing yourself would cost you his affection, that wasn't love. That was fear. That was convenience. That was control. And the moment you start seeing it for what it really was, is the moment you take your power back. The moment you realize you were never too much, you were just too aware. And that awareness, that's the beginning of your healing. False love doesn't ask for your heart, it borrows your presence. It doesn't build connection, it builds comfort. It's not rooted in depth, in truth, or in reciprocity. It's rooted in what's easy, what's predictable, what keeps one person full, and the other person just barely hanging on. And that's what he gave you. Not love, not partnership, not the safety of two people growing together, but convenience disguised as connection. He wanted you close, but not seen. He wanted your loyalty, but not your truth. He wanted your softness, your availability, your presence, but not your voice, not your needs, not your boundaries. That's how false love operates. It mimics intimacy. It imitates affection. It knows the language of care, but not the responsibility of it. It performs love, but doesn't live it. There were moments when he looked at you like you were everything. Moments he held you, whispered promises, talked about the future like it was carved in stone. And for a while, you believed it. Not because you were naive, but because when someone gives just enough to keep hope alive, you hold on. You convince yourself it will get better, that this is just a phase, that the pieces that are missing are just waiting to fall into place. But love, real love, isn't made of pieces. It's made of presence, of attention, of consistency. False love only shows up when it needs you, when it's lonely, when it's convenient, when it can benefit, and it disappears when it's time to do the real work, when it's time to listen, to grow, to change. It avoids responsibility like it avoids hard conversations. He loved having you around when you were quiet, when you said yes, when you made his life easier. That's when he was warm, affectionate, open. But the moment you needed something back, time, clarity, commitment, he pulled away, became distant, made you feel like you were asking for too much. And that's the trap. False love makes you believe your needs are a burden. It praises your silence, not your strength. You may have told yourself, he's just going through something. You may have excused the inconsistencies, dismissed the red flags, compromised on the kind of love you know you deserve, not because you didn't see the truth, but because you were afraid of it. Because calling it what it was would mean facing what you had to leave. And that's never easy, especially when the connection feels familiar. But familiarity doesn't equal love. Attraction doesn't equal effort. Passion doesn't equal peace. Sometimes the people who feel the most magnetic are the ones who reflect back your deepest wounds and call it fate. False love thrives on your willingness to wait, to fix, to try harder. It feeds on your patience. It stretches your hope until you can't tell the difference between loyalty and self-betrayal. He didn't love you because of who you were. He loved how available you were, how predictable, how forgiving. He loved how you said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. How you gave second chances before the first apology even came. How you stayed, even when your soul was begging you to leave. That's not love. That's dependency. That's someone taking from you without ever intending to pour back into you. True love requires effort, not just in moments of romance, but in moments of tension, of silence, of discomfort. True love sits in those moments and says, "I'm here. Let's work through this." False love gets up and leaves, or worse, stays physically but disappears emotionally. It withdraws. It punishes you with distance. It uses silence as a weapon. It makes you question your worth when things don't go perfectly. But love isn't perfect. It's not always easy. It doesn't always feel good in the moment, but it always builds. It always listens. It always honors your humanity. And if you've been in something that feels like love, but leaves you drained, confused, and constantly questioning your value, it's time to call it what it is: false love. Because love isn't supposed to leave you guessing. It's not a game of, how much can I tolerate? It's not a test of your silence, your flexibility, or your ability to survive neglect. It's a space to breathe, to be, to grow. And if what you're in doesn't offer that, then what you're in is not love. It's someone's comfort zone built on your sacrifice. You deserve real. You deserve someone who doesn't just show up when it's easy, but stays when it's hard. Someone who doesn't just say, "I love you," but shows it in actions, in effort, in consistency. Someone who doesn't just enjoy your presence, but respects your truth. That's the difference between love and false connection. One fills you, the other empties you slowly. And the moment you start choosing yourself, your peace, your wholeness, you stop settling for what's easy. You stop mistaking convenience for commitment. You stop calling false love almost. And you start demanding everything you were always worthy of. Toxic relationships don't always start with violence or shouting. Sometimes they begin with charm, attention, and the illusion of safety. They wear the mask of romance, the soft tone of "I care," and the warm gestures of affection. But underneath all of that, there's control. There's pressure. There's the slow, invisible erosion of your boundaries. And in many cases, that pressure becomes sexual, not in obvious ways, not always in forceful, aggressive acts, but in silence, in guilt, in the way someone looks at you when you say no, in the distance they create when you try to set a limit, in the way they act disappointed when you express hesitation, in the way they make you feel like withholding your body is equal to withholding love. And that's the game. One you never agreed to play, but found yourself losing anyway. He called it intimacy. He said it was about closeness, about connection. But the truth is, it was about control, about getting what he wanted when he wanted it, without having to ask twice, or sometimes without asking at all. And the moment you gave in, not because you wanted to, but because you felt obligated to keep the peace, to prove your love, or to avoid conflict, that wasn't a choice. That was pressure. That was coercion dressed up as romance. Sexual pressure in a toxic relationship is rarely spoken aloud. It's in the sigh when you say no, the eye roll, the sudden coldness, the unspoken punishment of withdrawal. It's in the way he makes you feel guilty for being tired or anxious or not ready. It's how he turns desire into a duty. How he acts like your body is his reward, his entitlement, his way of validating the relationship. And when you don't offer it, when you draw a line, suddenly you're the problem. Suddenly, the affection stops. So you begin to compromise, not because you feel safe or excited or free, but because you feel trapped. You're walking a tightrope, trying to balance his needs with your discomfort. You start to measure love by how much of yourself you can give away without completely disappearing. And in doing so, you confuse consent with compliance, desire with duty, passion with pressure. And the worst part, you blame yourself. You wonder if you're being too cold, too distant, too difficult. You convince yourself that maybe this is what relationships are supposed to feel like: confusing, heavy, transactional. But this isn't love. This is emotional extortion. It's the exploitation of your vulnerability. It's someone turning your fear of abandonment into access. You should never have to trade your comfort for closeness. Never have to silence your no just to avoid a mood shift. Never have to use your body as currency to keep someone emotionally present. That's not intimacy. That's manipulation. That's someone who doesn't care how you feel, only what you'll give. He might not have said, "You owe me," but his actions did, his silence did, the way he pulled away afterward did. And that's how toxic sexual pressure operates. It builds shame around your boundaries. It makes you feel like love is something you earn by surrendering your instincts, your safety, your self-worth. Over time, you stop even noticing when you say yes out of fear instead of freedom. That's how deep the conditioning goes. But love, real love, never feels like pressure. It doesn't make you flinch. It doesn't make you freeze. It doesn't make you choose between your peace and someone else's approval. Real love waits. It listens. It creates safety before it seeks connection. It sees your boundaries not as rejection, but as an invitation to deeper respect. If you've ever been in a relationship where no felt dangerous, where you said yes with a pit in your stomach, where you felt like affection was something you had to earn, understand this. You were being coerced, not loved. And you don't need to carry the shame of that. It's not your fault. Toxic partners are skilled at creating environments where you doubt your own discomfort, where you second guess your truth, where you apologize for protecting yourself. But that ends here. You're allowed to say no loudly, softly, firmly, shakily. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to need emotional security before physical intimacy. You're allowed to be loved without being touched. And if someone can't handle that, they're not loving you. They're using you. Toxic relationships and sexual pressure go hand in hand because one thrives on power and the other feeds on silence. But you don't have to stay silent. You don't have to normalize discomfort. You don't have to keep shrinking to make someone else feel big. Start reclaiming your space. Start honoring the parts of you that felt unheard, unseen, used. Start naming what it really was. Not romance, not passion, not connection, but manipulation. And in that naming, you start healing. You were never too much, never too broken, never too cold. You were simply in a place where your yes was never truly yours. But now you get to choose differently. You get to love yourself so fiercely that you never confuse pressure for passion again.